Jordan Salama, our next author, is a resident writer on staff for National Geographic. He tells stories about the world. He has written essays on climate change, letter writing, American Jewish life, tracked down Syrian traveling salesmen in the Andes, covered Lionel Messi and the Argentina national soccer team during the 2016 Copa America, and traveled across America by train, among many, many other adventures. He was actually going to be in Jordan today for this event, but his plans changed. You can find his writing in National Geographic, the New York Times, Smithsonian, Scientific American, and more. Jordan, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And wow, what a pleasure to hear all of the other authors speak. These books sound amazing. Yes, I was supposed to be coming to you live from Jordan. Jordan is not something that ended up happening, but hopefully it's just a postponement. I'm in New York, but happy to be here with my family. And as Spencer said, my name is Jordan Salama. I graduated not too long ago from college myself, Princeton University in 2019. And I actually just got back from Princeton's campus where the book was chosen as this year's pre-read for all incoming students. So there was a lot there that I'll talk about in a bit. But I'm here to talk about the book, Every Day the River Changes, which I like to call travel writing for a new generation, for my generation. It's the story of my journey down one of the greatest rivers in the Americas, the Rio Magdalena in Colombia. I followed the river from source to sea, spending time with people living along its banks and writing about Colombia's transition towards peace through the stories of the ordinary individuals I met along the way. And in a few minutes, I'm going to introduce you to some of them. But first, a bit about me. So I'm very interested in stories about the power of journeys with a single thread to connect disparate peoples, cultures, and identities. In some cases, this involves identities that I hold within my own being. I'm a kid born and raised in New York, but my family kind of comes from everywhere. Some of us are Iraqi Jews who migrated to Long Island, others of us Syrian Jews who ended up in Argentina and all over Latin America. We speak English, Arabic, Hebrew, French. These are languages that bounce all across our dinner tables and in our homes, and have shaped my life in many different ways. And now, as a young person making my own way in the world, I've been trying to understand what all of these different identities might mean. I've often thought about the fact also about my family's history. So most of my ancestors, if you look back far enough, worked as traveling salespeople, traders along the great trade routes of the world, from the Silk Road in the Middle East to the Inca Road of the Andes, selling textiles and carpets and spices by all means of transportation. One great-great-great-grandfather even supposedly had a caravan of more than 1,000 camels. It's pretty cool to think now that in my work, I'm kind of following in their footsteps, maybe, except instead of traveling and trading in physical goods, I'm trading in stories. I also want to mention that this book got started while I was still an undergraduate student myself at Princeton. The journey and the project behind it began as my senior thesis in college. And so at the core of this book is actually the journey of one young person's experience moving through the world, emphasizing the value of having empathetic, respectful conversations and cultural exchange. I want to tell you a little bit about the journey itself, though, and some of the people, the amazing individuals who I met along the way. When the book came out about a year ago, ever since, I've been talking about it in lots of different venues and bookstores and libraries and at schools. And it's amazing to see who gravitates towards which of these very real characters who have become dear friends of mine as well. So in traveling the 1,000 miles of the Rio Magdalena from the Andes Mountains to the Caribbean Sea, I journeyed by bus, by boat, by donkey, by canoe, by something called a motorized motobalinera, which is a kind of like improvised wooden platform on train wheels that's propelled by a motorcycle down an abandoned freight train track. I'm still here, so I survived that one. I stayed in family homes, in rented rooms, in riverside hotels. Again, at the heart of this book, though, are the people who I met along the way. And to preface this, I mean, this book is certainly not an expert history or tries to be an authoritative commentary. At 25, I can't really claim to be an expert on anything, But it does, however, try very hard to center the perspectives and local voices of the people who live in the heart of a country long affected by conflict, by environmental degradation, by inequality. My book also reflects very deeply on themes of intersectional identity and social justice throughout Latin America. So, who are some of these people? I journeyed into the Andes with a renowned Colombian anthropologist named Luis Manuel Salamanca in search of ancient megalithic statues hidden away in green, overgrown hills. I spent time with an elderly craftsman named Delfin Borrero, who's been building wooden canoes along the banks of the river in the city of Neiva for decades. In a tiny town called Estación Cocorná, I joined a group of biologists and community leaders in search of invasive hippopotamuses. In the 1990s, they escaped from a private zoo and proliferated in the Magdalena, the only hippos known to be living in the wild outside of Africa, causing vast damage to the ecosystem and to individuals' livelihoods. There in that same small town of Estación Cocorná, I also watched as a group of children and adults worked together to build kites from scraps of plastic flotsam and stalks of river grass. The kites shimmered as they danced high in the sky. Further down the river, I took a 7-hour chalupa, which is a fast ferry packed with passengers down a dazzlingly blue stretch of the Magdalena that seemed to open up towards the other side of the world. Accompanying me on that boat journey was the friend of a friend of a friend who said she was, quote, on her second chance at life and giving it all she'd got. And I'll let you read the book to find out what that means. In the forgotten river town of Mompos, where time seemed to stand still, I met Simon Villanueva, an 89-year-old jeweler who spent the better part of 75 years crafting jewels of silver and gold filigree, creating little flashes of beauty in a world marred by chaos and conflict. In the rural village of La Gloria, I rode along with Biblio Burro, Colombia's traveling donkey library, which for 25 years, under the leadership of schoolteacher Luis Soriano, has been hauling books for school children on remote farmsteads so that they could practice reading at home. But by the time I reached the end of the Magdalena, and those are just a few of the people you meet along the way, I began thinking about what all of these encounters meant. I was 21 years old when I traveled this river, when I traveled through Colombia, and college is a time that's naturally filled with questions. In fact, young adulthood is a time that's naturally filled in questions. I still don't know really where I'm going or what I'm doing, but these questions could be practical about what we want to do with our lives. They could be identity questions about who we are and what we want to be in a few years. In the middle of all this, when I was trying to figure out what I was going to write about for literally just a school project, my senior thesis, I liked the idea of writing about a river because on a river, you don't have to worry, at least physically, about where you're going. I also wondered what kinds of universal themes like hope or resilience or struggle could be found in a country like Colombia that had been suffering from more than 50 years of civil conflict and violence. Themes that could resonate not just for Latin Americans, but for all of us living in this uncertain and ever-changing world. Whether it's about following your passion and creating little pockets of beauty in a world marred by chaos and conflict, or working towards your love for the environment, or just figuring out your own personal identity on a journey of discovery, I have noticed that everyone draws something different from this multidisciplinary book. I saw that especially the last month that I spent at Princeton, where I was on campus for several weeks and visited classrooms and did workshops, did talks for administrative groups and all kinds of student organizations. But the key here is that, what people take away from this multidisciplinary book usually depends on their own backgrounds and experiences. I really do think that this is especially a book that can be read by students of all ages because it was written by a young person for young people in a time of a lot of chaos and change. So to get a better idea of what this book is about and how it can work for your school, I invite you all to take a look at the pre-read conversation that I had with Princeton's president, Chris Eisgruber, for the incoming class of 2026. That's on YouTube, and a few links that they're going to share about the coverage that came out of my month on campus. It was one of the most rewarding few weeks I've ever spent, and it only really strengthened my desire to continue to put my work in conversation with university students and communities across the country. So I hope that can include yours too. I'm really grateful for this opportunity, and thanks so much again for having me.